So welcome back. We've been talking about that pesky language learning plateau, why it happens, what might be causing it.
And now I think it's time to talk about, okay, what can we actually do about it?
Right, like how do we get unstuck?
Exactly. You're listening to this not just to understand the problem, but to find solutions,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So let's get into some of those. What are some things that people can actually start doing today to get themselves moving again?
Well, I think one of the most powerful tools you already have is passion. So think back to what made you excited to learn this language in the first place.
Right, like that initial spark. Was it a dream trip?
Yeah.
Was it wanting to connect with family members or loved ones? Or
Yeah.
maybe just being able to enjoy, books and movies in the original language?
Yeah, all of those things. And reconnecting with that initial spark can be incredibly motivating. Because when you hit those frustrating moments, those plateau moments, remembering why you started can give you the push you need to keep going.
Totally. It's like remembering the fuel that got you started on this journey in the first place.
Now, another crucial shift, I think, is moving from passive learning to active learning.
Yep.
So think about it this way. You wouldn't just watch someone else work out at the gym and expect to get stronger, right?
No, you have to actually do the work yourself.
Exactly. So instead of just passively consuming content, find ways to actively engage with the language. And one great way to do that is recording yourself speaking and then listening back and analyzing it.
So you become your own language coach in a way.
Yeah, you can kind of pinpoint those areas where you're stumbling, like maybe your pronunciation isn't quite right, or you keep making the same grammar mistakes, or there are vocabulary gaps that you didn't even realize were there.
It's like shining a light on those things that need work.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned earlier this idea of shadowing,
Mm.
and I think that's a really cool technique. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so shadowing is basically just mimicking what you hear. You find a native speaker audio or video, something like a speech or a podcast or a scene from a movie, and you just try to repeat what they're saying as closely as possible. So you're trying to get the intonation right, the rhythm, all these little nuances that make someone sound like a native speaker.
So you're kind of training your ear and your mouth to work together in that way.
Exactly. It feels a little awkward at first, but it's a really effective technique.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so we're reigniting our passion. We're getting more active with our learning. What else can we do to really push past this plateau?
Well, remember Krashen's idea of comprehensible input.
Right.
That means that we need to be challenging ourselves with material that's just a bit beyond our current level. So it's finding that sweet spot between, too easy and too difficult.
Yeah, I struggle with that sometimes. Like how do you know if you're pushing yourself enough without getting totally discouraged?
That's where I think setting smart goals can be really helpful.
Okay.
So instead of this vague goal of, I want to be fluent, which can feel overwhelming, you break it down into smaller, more achievable steps.
So instead of fluency, maybe it's, I want to learn 10 new words this week.
Yeah.
Or I want to have a 15-minute conversation with a language partner.
Exactly. And those little victories can actually be super motivating because they're proof that you're making progress, even if it doesn't always feel like leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's like building that momentum one small win at a time.
Now, one more thing I'll say is don't be afraid to mix things up. Think beyond just flashcards and textbooks.
Right.
Language learning should be enjoyable. And the more ways that you can engage with the language, the more likely you are to stay motivated and break through that plateau.
Yeah, so it's almost like making it a natural part of your life,
Yeah.
Not just like a chore you have to check off your list.
Exactly. So if you love music, listen to music in your target language. If you like to cook, try following recipes written in the language. Even watching movies and TV shows with subtitles can be really helpful.
And don't forget about real-world interactions. I mean, that's where the language really comes alive,
Yes,
right?
yes. So find a language buddy, join a conversation group, or maybe participate in some online language learning communities. And if it's hard to find native speakers to practice with, there's always tools like LangMagic that connect you with people for language exchange.
Cool. So it's all about creating those opportunities to use the language in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
So before we move on to even more strategies, I want to pause here for a moment and encourage you to think about the small wins that you've already achieved in your language learning journey. It's easy to focus on what's not working, but try to acknowledge those victories, even the small ones, because they can really re-energize your learning.
It's true.
So think about what's resonating with you so far. What strategies feel like they could make a real difference for you?
We'll be back with more insights in a moment.
Welcome back. We've been talking about this whole idea of the intermediate plateau, that feeling of getting stuck in your language learning.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's really come out of this conversation is that there's no like magic solution, right?
Yeah, no one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately.
It's really about understanding what's going on and figuring out what works best for you.
Exactly. You have
Yeah.
to kind of become your own language learning detective. Experiment, try different things, and figure out your own path to fluency.
And sometimes that means even questioning the whole idea of a plateau.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that? Are you saying it's not real?
Not exactly. It's more about shifting our perspective. I think we often get caught up in this idea that language learning should be this linear progression, this constant upward climb.
Right, like climbing a perfectly straight staircase to fluency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's much more like hiking a mountain trail,
Okay, I like that analogy.
right? There are going to be steep climbs, there are going to be gentle slopes, maybe even some switchbacks where you feel like you're going backwards for a bit.
That makes sense,
So
yeah.
there will be ups and downs, times when progress feels really rapid, and times when it feels painfully slow.
And that's totally normal.
It is, and those periods of slower progress, they might actually be a sign that your brain is working hard behind the scenes, consolidating what you've learned, getting ready for that next leap forward.
It's like those moments when you're working on a puzzle and then suddenly all the pieces start falling into place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of getting discouraged when progress feels slow, try to see it as part of the natural
Yeah,
process.
reframe it.
Yeah. Maybe you're making great strides in vocabulary, but grammar feels stuck. That's okay. It's all part of the journey. So how do we kind of navigate these inevitable ups and downs without losing motivation?
Well, mindset, I think, is key here. Instead of viewing those slower periods as failures, try to embrace them as opportunities for, consolidation and reflection.
Yeah. It's like shifting from that fixed mindset, I'm not good at this, to a growth mindset, I can figure this out, even if it takes time.
Exactly. And that growth mindset can make all the difference. Remember, fluency is a long-term goal. Be patient with yourself, celebrate the progress that you are making, and keep experimenting until you find what works for you.
Because, ultimately, language learning is about so much more than just acquiring a set of skills, right? It's about opening doors to new experiences, connecting with other cultures, becoming a more well-rounded person. It's about expanding your horizons and enriching your life. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the intermediate plateau, here's what we really want you to take away. You are not alone in this experience. It's normal, it's part of the journey, and most importantly, it's conquerable. With the right mindset, with the right strategies, and a willingness to keep experimenting, you can absolutely break through and reach that next level of fluency.
So think about what resonated with you today. What's one idea, one strategy, one small action you can take right now to get unstuck and reignite that passion for language learning?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, happy learning.